I am starting to get really worried that someone on council might be a computer from the 1980s in disguise.
I speak Fortran 77. Is that your language? Yeah, very. Oh, there's a few of us. Very good.
Hello and welcome to the Grand Parade Podcast. I'm your host, Independent City Hall reporter Matt Stickland. And this episode might be a little longer than the intermission updates because your councillors wrapped up the budget playoffs on Wednesday, March 26th. And that means Halifax has a budget. It does still need to be approved by council. However, since Budget Committee and Regional Council are all the same people in slightly different seats, the budget is expected to pass without issue. One minor caveat here is that the ratification is scheduled for April 8th, and the trade war is expected to start on April 2nd. It is extremely unlikely that the trade war will affect the passing of this budget. However, the trade war as currently threatened will likely increase the municipality's expenses almost overnight. For example, on April 3rd, buying books will become at least 25% more expensive for Halifax public libraries. The last time Halifax had a significant economic disruption, COVID, the budget needed to be recast. Just to say, don't be surprised if this budget, as passed on Wednesday, doesn't actually last the full fiscal year. The budget itself was a political victory for our new mayor, Andy Fillmore, who promised during his campaign to keep Halifax's property tax rate flat this year, which council did. However, property values went up by 4.7%, and so too will property taxes. Property taxes this year will pay for Halifax's $1.3 billion operating budget and $318 million capital budget. Thanks to the final debate day in Halifax's budget playoffs, we learned more about our new council's politics than we did about the budget. For example, the city doesn't care for its workers, but it does care for sports heroes and biodiversity. Some rookie councillors showed some expected inexperience, and a veteran councillor earned their first wooden spoon. So, with some further ado, I would just like to take a second to say thanks to everyone who's reached out to talk about the new format of the show or just kind of generally my reporting. I just want to say thanks, and it's been incredibly humbling to get all your responses. But anyways, now that budget season is over, this show will likely become a weekly council news show that I'm going to aim to be about 20 minutes long. This one is going to be a bit longer because it's going to have a bit more editorializing because this budget will be a pretty consequential budget, I think, in Halifax's history. And the last budget debate specifically, the one on Wednesday, provides an opportunity for me to explain how I think about policy and subsequently set my expectations for our councillors. I also use those expectations to determine things, like the Wooden Spoon Award. So with that, let's dig in. Councillor Tony Mancini started things off by asking council to approve $300,000 for the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame's ongoing renovations. As a one-time expense, this was taken out of Halifax's savings accounts. Councillor Catherine Morse and Trish Purdy were the lone votes no. This vote was followed by the first major political debate of the day, when Mayor Andy Fillmore put a motion on the floor to delay improving HRM's employee benefits program by a year. This would save the city about $1 million. The debate went in camera to talk about labor relations and numbers. Halifax, as an employer, does not have a great benefits package when compared to any other employer in any other sector, anywhere in the country. 68% of the HRM's employees said their benefits are critically important to them, and less than half were satisfied with the benefits currently on offer. Multiple councillors were concerned that having such poor benefits would decrease the city's ability to recruit and retain good people. This is likely true. I would also argue that recruiting good people on the promise of being able to do good in their community, only to then drag those people in front of council to make them answer questions about how good and important the work they do is, only for council to turn around and then cut funding to that person's good and important work to save property owners like 3 cents, while setting the city up for long-term fiscal hardships, may also be a deterrent to recruitment and retention. But I digress. This is what happens when councillor goes in camera and gives me too much time to think. When they came back from their in-camera session, Mayor Andy Fillmore closed out the debate saying this.
The motion is not in any way a referendum on the value on which we attribute to our incredible, talented, and hardworking employees. Rather, it is simply a deferral on the work so that we can increase the odds of maintaining a flat tax rate and improving affordability for all HRM residents.
Thanks to my 10 years in the Navy and wasted childhood in Air Cadets, and the military's track record on sexual harassment means I've done government-mandated sexual harassment, assault, and response training every other year since I've been 14 years old. And if there's one thing I've learned in that government-mandated training, it's that impact, not intent, is what matters. Fillmore can't just say this is not a referendum on how the city values its employees. This budget, and if you include the library support staff strike, this year has been a referendum on the HRM's labor relations. Library support workers had occupational health and safety concerns, and they got meager offerings at the bargaining table in return. The Halifax Regional Police had a serious but statistically improbable health and safety complaint, and the city was compelled to buy them an armored personnel carrier. Now, better benefits are being delayed. Getting better benefits wasn't explicitly negotiated in the last round of collective bargaining. It was kind of done on like a, this is important, right? An on-faith handshake deal. But that means council wasn't legally compelled to give better benefits to employees like they were with the armored personnel carrier. Councillors Sam Austin, Nancy Hartling, Catherine Morse, Jean St. Amand, Janet Steele, and Laura White voted for workers in this referendum on labor. They were defeated by Councillor Patty Cuddle, Kathy Daigle-Gammon, Billy Gillis, David Hensby, Virginia Hinch, Becky Kent, Tony Mancini, Trish Purdy, Zhang Young, and Mayor Andy Fillmore, who voted for a tax break for landowners instead of benefits for workers. The good news for employees of the HRM, and bad news for property taxpayers of the HRM, is that municipal collective agreements are being negotiated this year. On top of that, city lawyers have advised council that the city can be legally compelled to remedy occupational health and safety complaints with no upper limit, and council just voted to tell employees that council can't be trusted to provide the needed health benefits based only on faith. If city staff were able to give council political advice, they probably would have said that it is extremely likely the new collective bargaining agreements will now be more comprehensive, extensive, and expensive than they would have been at the start of the budget adjustment list debates. This vote to save $1 million today will make the city far more expensive, as HRM employees have just been told by council that they need to define their own benefits at the collective bargaining table. After that referendum, where council voted to say that HRM employees are not worth a couple bucks a year in property taxes, Councillor Laura White put a motion on the floor to increase the road safety capital budget by just less than $1 million and to take that money from Halifax's savings accounts. So, it wouldn't affect this year's tax rate. The funding would expand Halifax's existing pedestrian safety infrastructure, like the flashing yellow lights. While it's not the best Halifax could do, it's what Halifax will do, and it's better than nothing. And there are some positives to draw from this debate, as highlighted by Councillor Laura White in her closing remarks.
I don't think this is the number one cure-all thing for road safety, these items. I think these are what we can do at this time in this budget to help. I've had lots of conversations with staff. I'm a huge fan of looking at our design and how we can do our intersections better for safety, how we can consider narrower roads, either when we're building new roads or retrofitting our older roads, that wide roads lead to speeding, and really coming up with a plan for vulnerable road user safety is something we haven't talked about yet, but I'd like to go there. So this is what I feel we can do for this year, and I'm really excited to hear that a lot of people want to support this. So I think we should go ahead and start here.
This passed with only John Young, Jean St. Amand, and Billy Gillis voting no. I think it is telling that even austerity superfan Trish Purdy voted for this motion, and only rookie councillors voted against. Best guess on this vote is that rookie councillors are still thinking like private citizens and not policy makers when it comes to road safety. And with Gillis's vote specifically, it's not a guess, because he laid out his reasoning during the debate when he said this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Road safety is super important, obviously, but we can't continue to spend ourselves beyond our limits here. I think a better use of taxpayers' money would be maybe an education program for drivers and pedestrians, and that's something currently we can do right now with our communications department. We can buy all the equipment we want, but we still have the human factor in there. Humans have to use it properly by pressing the button. I mean, just this morning out here, the crosswalk here, right by City Hall, lots of flashing lights and everything like that. What do you see? Walking right out, not even pressing the button. Now, that being said, I think there's a responsibility there for both drivers and pedestrians. I mean, I've seen pedestrians wander down the sidewalk and just do a 90-degree turn right out into the road, not even slow down a little bit. And then that's all it takes then is for the driver to be on their phone. Boom, there's a collision, right? And unfortunately, the pedestrian is going to lose most of the time. And now that being said, I think this is super important, like I said at the beginning, but I'm not in favor of continuing to spend money when an education program, I think, would be just as sufficient. So with that, I'm going to not support this.
In part because Gillis's comments were most precise, and in part because in Gillis's case, it does seem to be a genuine policy-making inexperience, I'd like to break down the issues in Gillis's argument for the benefit of anyone who's never really thought about road safety before. First, this bit.
I think a better use of taxpayers' money would be maybe an education program for drivers and pedestrians.
Studies have shown that education campaigns are effective when they are trying to achieve a specific goal related to a specific policy or issue, meaning that education campaigns are or would be effective in teaching people how to interact with leading pedestrian intervals, or to teach them how not to drive in the bus lanes in the terribly designed new Cogswell roundabout. But a general, hey, be safer out there campaign, like Heads Up Halifax, is largely ineffective. Up next, this bit about responsibility.
I mean, just this morning out here, the crosswalk here, right by City Hall, lots of flashing lights and everything like that. What do you see? Walking right out, not even pressing the button. Now, that being said, I think there's a responsibility there for both drivers and pedestrians.
This one comes up a lot, and for a lot of reasons, but it's the myth about shared responsibility. Generally speaking, in society, it's frowned upon to harm others, and we've set up a regulatory framework that agrees. As a result, we have decided to license activities that can harm others, whether it be selling alcohol, owning a gun, or driving a car. We require people to get special permits and licensing to prove that they're not a danger to others when they're doing an activity that's inherently dangerous to others. That's what the license is for, to prove that someone is safe enough to do these dangerous things. For driving, having a license means driving like what you are doing is inherently dangerous. The crosswalk Gillis is referencing is a high-traffic 4-lane crossing on Duke Street right by City Hall, between the bus terminal and the mall, and the downtown core. If drivers were respecting the burden of their shared responsibility that came with having a license, drivers would drive in dense, high pedestrian areas like downtown, expecting pedestrians to jump out into the street at any moment and being surprised when it didn't happen, not the other way around. That is the responsibility demanded of them by their license. Now, I would just like to use a personal anecdote to demonstrate the absurdity of the other half of insisting pedestrians have an equal level of responsibility in their safety to drivers. School in Nova Scotia starts at 4 years old, and my child takes the bus to school. Since I live in rural Halifax when school started, to get to the bus, my 4-year-old and I had to walk on an unpaved shoulder where 1-ton vehicles pass within a few feet at 50 kilometers an hour. At 4 years old, children are dynamic and erratic because, they're children. However, Gillis's argument means that by 4 years old, our children walking to the bus to school are expected to know that walking to the bus is a mortally dangerous act and that they are the ones responsible for getting to their school bus safely. The argument says that my 4-year-old is responsible for his own safety and ignores that provincial legislators have lax licensing requirements for such a deadly activity. My child has to be responsible for his own safety, even though the school board won't add a stop closer to our house, which is safer and requires less walking on dangerous roads. My child has to be responsible for his safety, even though the city recently repaved the roads and didn't make it any safer for him to walk to the bus stop by adding sidewalks. My child has to be responsible for his safety, even though he's not the one driving the 1-ton personal vehicle at lethal to him speeds during school bus pickup hours in a residential zone. That's absurd. However, everyone knows that a 4-year-old is obviously not responsible for their safety. It falls on me, the tax-paying parent, to ensure that my child knows how dangerous the world built with my tax dollars is for him. One of the things that allows the myth of shared responsibility to continue is that people underestimate the danger posed by driving and what causes that danger. Or, as Councillor Billy Gillis said when he punched back into the debate, this.
People just wander out into the road. And like I said before, that all it takes is a driver to be looking down, which we know there's all kinds of people on their phone. I'm not worried about, getting hit because I stop and watch and wait.
However, if you do any reading on how sight and brains work, you'll discover pretty quickly that we don't actually see a whole lot, and our brains just kind of like fill in a disturbing amount of detail on the fly. Meaning sometimes, if people don't expect to see a car, they may look both ways, not see a car, and then step out to get hit by a car that their brain just did not register. This happens in reverse, with drivers looking for but not seeing pedestrians, apparently all the time. But importantly for people in positions of power, even though it's easy to scapegoat the pedestrian looking at their phone who step out without looking, there are people in Halifax who have every right to walk in this city who can't wait, like children, or who can't look, like people who don't have sight. And these people can't be held equally responsible for their safety based on things they can't control, like age or eyesight. In the book When Driving is Not an Option, author Anna Zivarts says that about 30% of any city can't drive. Often they can't drive for reasons like age or eyesight, which also makes it impossible for a large part of that 30% of Halifax's population to meet the required standard of shared responsibility for their own personal safety. If the city's Safe Streets strategy relies on shared responsibility to be successful, spoiler alert, it does, that means that anyone who can't meet the health or age requirements to be full partners in their shared responsibility are just SOL and at greater risk of injury or dying in the infrastructure that our taxes build. Anyways, long way of saying that Gillis's arguments indicate that he hasn't really thought about road safety in any meaningful way yet. But his debut as a councillor suggests that he is one to seek out new information and, if appropriate, change his mind. I think Gillis is one to watch as he starts digging into road safety. Councillor Sam Austin added a mediation pilot to the budget. If this pilot has the impact it's predicted to, it should save the police, bylaw officers, and councillors some headaches and the city a bunch of money for a cool $100,000 in spending. Kathy Daigle-Gammon got a staff report sent to council about paving some HRM-owned gravel roads. Council will debate whether it's more cost-effective to fail to maintain them as gravel roads or fail to maintain them as paved roads. Either way, a problem for next year's budget. Mayor Andy Fillmore kicked into a hornet's nest when he proposed the city could generate $1 million in revenue from permits and also save $400,000 by denying poor people access to HRM's recreation facilities as one bundled motion. The permit thing was relatively uncontroversial. The HRM is making more on permits this year than it expected, and it expects to be in the same ballpark for the next 2 years. This got amended to reflect Halifax's current projected earnings of $1.2 million, and council voted to bet that we're going to make $1.2 million from permits next year. So while it is a bit of a bet, it is a relatively safe one. The controversial part of Fillmore's motion was delaying the start of the HRM's affordable access programs at multi-district facilities throughout the city, the Cole Harbour Places, Canada Game Centres, and Zatzman Sportsplexes of the world. Even though the district facilities have affordable access programs, they're not as robust or widely available as the HRM's version. The city is changing its recreation booking software on April 1st, and this was providing the HRM an opportunity to get more of Halifax's poorest into using HRM's recreation facilities. Councillor Trish Purdy earned herself the wooden spoon when she said this.
It's not like there's no affordable access programs being offered. There is. They're not going to stop. And this program isn't even in existence yet. So we're just going to postpone the start date a few months to save some money on the tax rate for this year, which I'm very much in support of. And thank you for bringing this forward, Mr. Mayor.
Why did Purdy earn the wooden spoon, you ask? See if you can figure it out by listening to Sam Austin make his arguments against the motion.
The MDF piece. Yes, it's a new program. However, it was planned to be started this year. This does go to the most vulnerable people in our communities. And yes, for us, it's like, oh, well, we can, that takes a little bit of pressure off the tax raise. And, you can get to it in start of the new fiscal year. If you have young kids, 3 months, that's a whole session that you potentially are not going to get the benefit from this. And our staff did indicate there in the question I asked, are the MDF programs as good as our affordable access program? And the answer I heard from them is no, they're not as comprehensive, because the MDFs have long been in a position of having to, the task that we had for the MDFs was that balance your budget historically and don't come asking HRM for money. So the programs that they've traditionally offered have not been as expansive as what affordable access program would be. So, in a budget that is supposedly about affordability, let's cut some slack to the people in the community who are the most pressed. Thank you.
Mayor Andy Fillmore and councillors David Hensby, Becky Kent, Trish Purdy, and John Young voted to prevent poor people from accessing rec programming for 3 months to save property owners less than $5 next year. Luckily, they were soundly defeated by everyone else. Councillor David Hensby put a motion on the floor to get the long-awaited Ross Road realignment moved up a year. Councillor White was a lone vote no. The Youth Advocate Program, which is a program that gets kids who are moving towards bad social groups like gangs into good social groups like sports teams. This program costs a couple $100,000 a year, but getting kids into the program is way cheaper than getting adults who end up in jail. This passed with Mayor Fillmore, Councillor Gillis, Steele, Young, and Purdy voting no. Councillor Trish Purdy voting for a road realignment but not accessible recreation program or crime diversion programs, all in the name of affordability and public safety, was what capped off an excellent wooden spoon performance from the veteran councillor Trish Purdy. Councillor Sean Cleary got the city to kick in one-time funding for the Discovery Centre, and then, a bit unexpectedly, Halifax's budget adjustment list debates ended. All in all, this budget was a big political win for Mayor Andy Fillmore, who achieved his campaign promise of keeping the property tax rate flat. However, this is a very risky budget to pass when considering the future and current fiscal health of the municipality. For a decade, council has been keeping the tax rate low and paying for that low rate out of municipal savings accounts. Also, to keep taxes low, a lot of capital projects are being funded through debt. The city of Halifax is now more or less out of savings, with a massive credit card bill and capital projects to pay off. The city of Halifax has also been cutting municipal services to the bone to keep property taxes low. But even then, due to things like collective agreement renegotiations, fuel prices, and tariffs, maintaining the status quo plus the cost of the city's capital debt is going to cost the city a lot of money. Very soon, probably next year, but definitely before the next municipal election, the city will need a massive influx of revenue through fees and taxes or drastic cuts to municipal services to balance the budget, both of which will be extremely unpopular. When considering the relatively low impact of property taxes and the expected inflationary pressures on household budgets, keeping the tax rate flat to save the average homeowner $119 a year is probably not enough to buy the goodwill needed to cover the pain of budget shortfalls council just approved in the budget they just passed. And that'll do it for me today. Sorry for the length of this episode. I know it might not actually be that long. I promised a long episode off the top, and I haven't gotten an editing yet, but it might not actually be that long. We'll see how much I ramble right now. Anyways, you can expect a weekly roundup probably on Monday, maybe on Friday. I'm not sure. Not sure what my workflow will be now that budget season has done, and I do need to put some work into setting up my new publication, so we'll see when the next podcast comes out. For anyone who is listening to this podcast on YouTube, the biggest piece of feedback I got was basically there's videos on YouTube, which out of context is a very strange thing to say about YouTube, but in the context of a podcast, I understand. So there's not going to be any video that goes with this podcast on YouTube. It'll just go up there faster. If you really want the footage, let me know. It'll come back. I've recorded it just in case, but the monastery is doing well. But anyways, that'll do it for me today, and that'll do it for Halifax's budget season 2025, unless there's a recast. And you can find me at Land of Sticks, wherever @signs are bought and sold for free, which are Instagram and Blue Sky. As well, did you like this show? Tell your friends, like, share, review, subscribe. But for real, that'll do it for me today. Bye!